Today, we're diving into the Hollywood hustle with the one and only Chief Content Officer of Heartbeat Production, Bryan Smiley. Get ready for some serious behind-the-scenes action as we chat about the wild world of the entertainment business. We are breaking down some of the Hollywood secrets like we've never seen before. So, let's get the show on the road. Bryan, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you
Glad
here,
to be
man.
here.
And wow, we are in a unique time to be in our industry.
Yeah, we are.
Tons of stuff going on right now. It's crazy.
But we want to take the audience back, and for our listeners and viewers, you started. Well, you're from Detroit.
Born and raised.
Born and raised in
That's right.
Detroit. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing and who made you?
What inspired you to get into this film industry?
It's a great question, guys. Listen, I grew up in a really entrepreneurial family. My mother was a teacher by day, but like had a business by night. My dad was is a real estate agent, so he bought and sold properties. He also managed properties. He invested in properties. So I grew up around a very entrepreneurial household.
Right.
And today, I produce. I'm an executive, and so much of what I do is really entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
So
You're selling content, which is
selling
landscape.
content. That's right. So much of it really is in my DNA. So
Right.
you meet probably a lot of people from Detroit have the same kind of thought. It's the city where you have to hustle hard.
Yeah.
No jobs too big, no jobs too small. Roll up your sleeves and get things done.
So what block you was hanging out with Eminem?
Listen, I grew up in Detroit, amazing middle class neighborhood.
Oh, okay.
My neighbors were like doctors and lawyers and cops
Wow.
and council people. So I grew up around a lot of black excellence.
Yeah. What is this, 80s?
The 80s. Wow. I'm not that old. No,
Yeah.
I grew up in the 90s. Okay. In the 90s.
You could be born in the 80s, like late 89. He's trying to play you right now.
That's a little shady. But by the way, I will say, it still feels like so long ago. The 90s.
Yeah, the 90s.
You say 90s. I say that now in my company. People are like, oh, God, how old are you?
Yeah.
But
100%.
by the way, it was a crazy time in Detroit.
Right.
And
Yeah.
Detroit today, I think, is a vibrant, energetic city. If you have a great idea, no one's going to stop you. When I came up there, it was a little more dangerous.
90s
That's
Detroit.
right.
crazy. That was gang
rough.
violence.
But I would say I was exposed to the reality of the world.
Right.
But I was sheltered from a lot of the crazy stuff. And I just saw so many black professionals like doing their thing.
Right.
And I think for me, it really instilled a level of confidence that there's nothing you can't do if you really go after it.
Do you have siblings?
I have one sister.
One sister. So
That's right.
in your household, academia was like present.
It was. My mother was a teacher. She had multiple degrees, 2 masters.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that was really instilled in us. My uncle was a principal. He founded 2 schools, right?
Oh, gosh.
So I grew up kind of in this really academic world.
Yeah,
where
yeah,
education was very important.
Wow. That's
And
crazy.
then you go from that to Chicago. So
Right.
more dangerous city to even more dangerous
But
city.
still, you're still in the realm of academia. So it's not even like you're not in the street or life like that. So
No.
But you're black, though. They kind of can
Yeah.
try to...
true.
They bleed into each other.
Yeah,
you
really,
listen,
that's the crazy thing in dynamic being black.
That's right. Like in
it's cross
Detroit,
pollinate.
you know people via your family or whatever who are on both sides of the track,
Yes,
so to speak.
100%.
Right. So you kind of get a taste of everything, but I think that really kind of laid a really strong foundation for Hollywood, quite frankly.
Yeah. What inspired you? What was like the inception of like, okay, this is where I want to go?
Yeah. So listen, I knew I wanted to do something that was different, right? I thought maybe I could be a lawyer, but this sounds a little corny. So I'm like, should I say what I'm going to say it anyway?
That's it.
But I saw this movie called Forrest Gump. Everyone knows Forrest Gump.
Yeah. Okay.
And I saw a lot of movies. I always love films. But that movie really somehow touched me emotionally. And it made me start thinking, maybe I should have a career in cinema.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And you're from Detroit. No one talks about movies.
No, right.
The only black person who was not on camera that you mentioned was Spike Lee.
Yeah.
Right? So it got me kind of thinking about film. When I was 16, my father bought me a camera.
Oh,
A
snap.
still camera. I was doing a lot of still photography. And eventually we got a really nice video camera. and I just started making movies. So at 16, I was doing like documentaries, directing, writing, producing. You know how it is. You're in high school, you do everything, right?
Right.
I got involved with a local program. I forget the name of it, but they really helped high school kids learn more about film and TV production. And that really just kind of started the journey. And from that moment on, like I spent all of my free time like shooting low budget films, short films, and documentaries.
Cultivating this entertainment realm at a very young age of 16
And
years
these
old.
are the building
right.
blocks to exactly what you're doing now.
100%.
Which is crazy. I mean, we didn't get exposed to filmmaking until our
23, 24.
well, 19 we made with our first short film.
right.
So,
Right. So what were your friend groups like during that time, and who were you
Yeah.
running with?
Normal people.
Normal
You know
people.
what I mean? People who had great ambition, athletes, you know, with, the normal kind of thing from like a deeply chocolate city.
so obviously college was a big thing.
was.
And then you go to Columbia University in Chicago.
That's right. So I applied to 3 schools.
Okay.
Got into 2.
Okay.
Columbia, NYU.
Oh, okay.
Columbia, though, was special to me because they said you can start making movies your first semester there.
Really?
Yeah, well, NYU was like you got to do all your like gen eds.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so
yeah.
by year 2, you can kind of lean into your major. So for me, as someone who was already making kind of films,
Right.
I was like, I want to go to Chicago. Also,
Yeah.
my aunt and my grandmother lived in a suburb of Chicago, so I spent all my childhood summers there.
Oh, you're familiar with
so
the
I
area.
knew the city was close. So it was like a no-brainer for me.
Right.
So in 2001, I graduated high school, moved to Chicago, lived in the South Loop, Columbia College, which you referenced.
Yeah.
And was making movies, man. It was great.
And you're still making movies during this time too, because I guess your first entry in college is like, yeah, go do whatever you want.
That's right. They were hyper aggressive in supporting entrepreneurs and
Right.
producers, and they'll give you the equipment you needed and really the resources to make whatever you
So
felt
the
like.
first iteration of your filmmaking career, was you trying to be a director or
Yeah.
you were trying to be a producer? What was that realm like?
So it was interesting. So in high school, I was really excited about directing.
Okay.
And I actually met Spike Lee at some workshop in Detroit.
Really?
And he had me come to New York, and I interviewed to intern at 40 Acres at the time.
Wow.
Bed-Stuy. Ended up not doing it. But the point was, I really thought I was going to be a filmmaker, a director.
Right.
But before college, I really started leaning into the producing aspect because I love business. I love every kind of business, right?
Right.
And for me, the idea of working in business and entertainment, specifically film, was really exciting. And producer was that kind of role.
Yeah.
That was the best version of creative and business. So when I went into Columbia year 1, I declared I wanted to be a producer.
Wow. Yeah, that's insane. I mean, most people, especially our black culture, we want to be in front of the camera.
That's
we want
right.
the spotlight. We want the publicity.
Sure.
But you already knew, I mean, from an entrepreneurial background,
right.
you're like, this is where the money is made.
Yeah,
In a sense.
listen, I love the idea of where the money's made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then also like really partnering with like true bleeding heart creatives.
Yeah.
Because I, even to this day, I consider myself someone who's a great advisor to artists, right? So for me, that was really exciting.
That's beautiful.
And also, you had internships during this process. What were some of your internships like?
So I had a few. I mean, one of them was like, I worked at like a commercial production company. So Detroit obviously is the automotive capital of the world.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of the ad companies, they were shooting a lot of commercials for the big 3, Chrysler, Ford, and General Motors. So before I went to Columbia, I was doing a lot of PA work for these big kind of auto commercials. It was a company, I think they were called Grayson Wild. It's a long time ago now. Right? But I think it was Grayson Wild. And they were doing a lot of these big commercials, and these were like big professional fancy sets. So it was my first kind of introduction into like professional content production, right? But then I also worked for like in Chicago, local management companies that were like repped writers. So I got exposed to kind of that pitch process from Chicago.
What was some of the packaging like during that time? What were the content they were producing?
Here's what I would say.
It's a bar.
They were Chicago-based.
Right,
Yeah,
Chicago based.
Which tells you a lot.
Yeah.
So I think they were doing the best they could.
Right,
So
right,
I think what I learned from them was just like hustle initiative. Was a lot of cold calling.
Yeah.
A lot of sending at that time. Like submission sheets.
Facts.
Via fax.
I mean, back then you really had to be a
Facts.
hustler.
You
I mean,
did.
you didn't have social media to like actually
That's right.
contact
There was
people.
no social media. Like even when I was at Columbia, when I was leaving is when Facebook was first starting to become a thing.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it was still contained to kind of Ivy League schools.
Yeah.
So it was early, bro.
And plus, too, you had to have some grit, and also you had to have you know, you can't be thin skinned. You have to have some thick skin because you get
That's
rejected all the time by picking up that
How
phone.
did you-
You're right. So by the internship, it was funny. You know, it was really like just free work, right?
Yeah.
But my job was to cold call management companies and agencies in LA.
Oh,
We had the
the
longest
heck?
list. So and I'm like a kid in college, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So every day for like 6 hours,
F you.
4 hours, right? All day long. And they give these binders with like log lines and synopsis, so you have to quickly like try to understand what the project's about,
Right,
And
right.
get on the phone with some agent in LA who's like, who are you calling
Yeah,
me?
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And try and like pitch artist work.
That's crazy because you're developing your pitch, which
That's
you
right.
use in a studio system
That's right.
every single day. And then honing that craft, you're doing it at a really early age, which is crazy.
Nuts.
That's nuts.
So what were some of your short pitches like?
I don't remember. They weren't good. They were terrible, right? But it was like you kind of like read the sheet
Right.
and like tried to do the thing, and all you wanted them to say was, "Okay, send it over."
Yeah,
That's all you wanted. Okay,
Right.
send the script. Right?
Do you think that's possible in today's day and age? Is it possible for someone to cold call a production company or an agent or a manager? And say, hey,
listen, it's possible.
Right.
Your odds aren't great
Right.
of success, but you never know, right?
Nothing's
Like,
not really
Yeah,
impossible.
that's right. I mean, here's what I would say. I think, you know, the higher up the person you're calling, then probably you won't get through.
Right.
Yeah.
But maybe you can connect with some young, hustling manager or agent who might take your call, and you never know.
Right.
I'm not sure that's the winning strategy, though.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
What do you think is the winning strategy for a perfect pitch? For an introduction to a general or maybe, you know, a first meeting or first pitch meeting?
I mean, listen, I think at the end of the day, if you have done the work and you've kind of figured out how to like identify the gatekeepers and navigate you in the door where people will at the very least take the time, whether it's a coffee or a meeting or whatever, right? If you have mastered that part, I think you can then convince someone to like hear your story. And I think the idea is being passionate about what the story is,
Right.
understanding the creative, right? But also understanding why the creative fits in today's culture and why there is an audience behind it, right? So oftentimes people pitch ideas, they reference successful other things
Right.
as a reference.
Right.
And the value in that, I think, is just showing the person you're trying to sell to that there's an audience for what I'm telling you about, right? At the end of the day, the goal in the pitch to me, if it's a script specifically, is to get that person just to read it,
Right.
right? Because that's the biggest thing. And I tell people all the time, you know, when you ask somebody to read a script, you're saying, give me 2 hours of your life. You don't know me.
Yeah.
Not for real.
Yeah.
Not real.
But give me 2 hours of your very busy life.
Right.
To read this thing
Yeah.
that will maybe help me and maybe both of us, right?
Right.
And that's kind of a big ask.
Yeah.
Right?
90% of the content you're getting, you're literally passing on because
That's right.
you have so many other things on your plate, or either it's not up to standard.
Very true. But also tell people like, you know, you're pitching to human beings.
Yes.
They have families.
Yeah.
They have their day job.
Yeah.
They have projects. They have personal hobbies. They have a lot of things as human beings they're doing every single day.
Right.
And you're asking for hours of their time.
Yeah.
And if you forget that, like people are not machines.
Yeah.
You know, people are not going to just sit in a desk or a computer or whatever all day and just read random scripts. They have to really want to.
Right.
And the minute you lose sight of that part, you've kind of lost. So when you're trying to pitch someone to believe in your idea and ultimately like lean into it, you have to think about all of those factors. It is a true sacrifice. And you can say, "Oh, isn't that your job?" Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you don't have like a filmography or reputation, they would rather spend their time reading an established person's script
Right.
than yours.
100%.
That does not mean you can't get through. You absolutely can. But you have to be smart about it and respectful about it and have no expectation.
What gets you excited about a script or a project that you're kind of filtering through?
I mean, it really is the idea. Like the
Right.
idea is always the thing that allows me to lean in, right? And I think, you know, listen, a lot of what we do today is pretty broad. So we are also selling. So people sell to me, we sell to others, right? And I need to believe that whatever I'm selling to others will actually generate revenue and make that executive also successful. One thing I always come back to, and you'll hear me maybe in this interview talk about it often, we forget that at every step, these are human people.
Right. Yep.
So
Yeah, we
when
do.
we're selling to an executive, yes, we're passionate about the thing we're making, but that executive has to also sell it to their boss oftentimes, and they're protecting their job and their reputation.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And if I don't understand that, I'm already lost.
Yeah.
So I try and give them winning scripts and packages so they look great for their boss.
Right.
So we get the thing made.
That's
So
beautiful.
2009, we have young, scrappy Bryan. He try to get out in these streets.
That's right.
What brings you to Los Angeles? I know you
Yeah.
also worked for Brian Davis in New Region and stuff.
Yeah, I spent half of my career at New Regency, which
Regency.
at that time was doing film and TV.
Okay.
And they were deficiting both the production cost, but also the P&A cost. So New Regency was a very unique place. So they were true partners with the studio. At that time, they were at Fox, still are at Fox, but this before Fox was acquired by Disney. And when they made a movie, they not just fully or co-finance again the negative costs,
Right.
but they were also in it for half or all of the marketing costs. So they were making significant investments every film.
So they have to win.
They have to really believe they're going to win.
Right. Okay.
But because of that, I learned so much about like financing and marketing and home entertainment and distribution because they were true partners with the studio.
Was that your first entry level in the studio system?
It was. So when I started the company, I was an assistant to a guy named Reeve Milshin, who at that time was kind of running the product integration team over there. They had a big deal with Daimler Chrysler. At that time, it was one company. He now is the CEO of the company. I spent a year working for him, and some change. And then I spent the next 2 years as an assistant to the owner of the company, a man named Arnon Milshin, who's the owner of New Regency and the producer for New Regency. And I just learned a lot about the world.
Right.
And the business, but the world in general.
What were some of your key takeaways?
Exactly. What are some key takeaways?
I mean, listen, I learned from Arnon, who, at that time, very high net worth. I think he was, according to Forbes, maybe worth like $2 billion.
Jeez.
Today he's worth like $8 billion or something, right? But what I learned about Hollywood is, one, it's a business.
Right.
Okay. Two, a lot of the major decisions are not made by creatives.
Whoa.
I learned that quickly, right?
That's a gem.
The creatives worked for the decision makers,
Right.
right? But many of the people who ran the studios networks and, quite frankly, the world as we know it, are very powerful, high net worth people, right? So I learned that pretty early on, and it taught me that it's important to have a passion for the art and the scripts, but also to truly understand the business,
Right.
because those two things are completely married, and one doesn't succeed without the other.
What do you see in the business today that I think we live in an advertising society or an advertising mechanism in Hollywood? Is that where we're pivoting for movie making or digital content creation?
Yeah, because I think the commercial landscape is different now. Most is social media pushed. So where are we?
What do you think movies are leading towards these days?
for marketing?
That's a great layered question.
Yeah.
I think that people still want great stories.
Yeah.
Between 90 and 120 minutes, let's call it, right? I think, though, as a business model, we will see a slight retraction in the number of films made and the types of films made, right? So I think we went through a very long period of like big, explosive Marvel films were kind of driving everything. And then there were layers of other films all the way down to the indie film business, right? But if you look at kind of what's happening with distribution, which is driven by technology, smartphones, high-speed internet, obviously social media, I believe that, you know, a lot of distribution will take place on platforms that are accessible via your tablet, phone, or connected TV.
Right.
And because of that, you'll see a lot more at-home engagement and content. And because of that, I think you'll see a lot more investment in episodic content. Okay, because that brings people back to the platform week after week, day after day, right? Versus a film is kind of like a one-time situation, right? With that said, I think that films survive, and I even think if you look at things like, you know, last year the big thing was Barbieheimer, right?
Right. Yeah. Huge marketing ploy too.
Huge, right? But then you look at like Oppenheimer was truly an original idea.
100%.
But what I would consider maybe an esoteric figure, yet it became a $1 billion result.
Yeah.
Barbie, yes, based on massive IP, but still a toy, but approached and developed from a very clear artistic point of view, also became $1 billion business.
Right.
I say that to say I think that audiences want films, and they're willing to be challenged by what they see on screen, and they would show up for it theatrically and in streaming. But I do think overall we'll see less films produced.
Do you think the streaming model has changed with the introduction of YouTube creators and YouTube influencers? I think
1,000%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so people come to me all the time, ask for advice. I would say that the creator economy will only keep expanding and growing.
Right.
Right. You know, even when I was at New Regency, I spent a lot of time learning about. They called them influencers then, right? A lot of the Viners that were, many of which are still around today, which were kind of changing the landscape. Obviously, the Instagrammers, and obviously, the YouTube MCN thing was exploding, right, month over month, right. I think today with like TikTok and still Instagram and still, I just think that the big difference is if you have a great idea and a personality and the willpower, you can build a brand enterprise without anyone else telling you yay or nay.
Right. You're the control of your home.
You control everything.
Wow.
If I go out today with a movie, $100 million, big stars like Kevin Hart, right? I still have to ask someone else permission,
Really?
right? I have to ask. We have a amazing deal at Netflix. I have to go to our partners at Netflix and help them understand why this thing is valuable for us and for them, right? And the creator
Even
economy.
with Kevin Hart, you still have to go ask permission with.
Of course, right?
Wow.
Because when you think about that level of investment, and it makes sense,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Everybody needs to be okay with that risk, because making movies are a risk.
Yeah, 100%.
right?
Especially when you get into 100 million. So
Every day, right?
Right.
But I think in the creator economy, you have to ask no one for anything. Cameras are cheap.
Yeah.
Tech is cheap. Editing is cheap. Everything's cheap now.
Right.
And I say cheap, I mean it's very accessible.
Yes.
exactly.
So with the right idea, the right motivation, the right hustle, you can literally build something without anyone telling you yes or no.
I do want to tackle something you said really profoundly. Is just like the landscape of movie stars. What does that look like in 2024 and 2030? What is that going to be impacting? Is Hollywood stepping away from this movie star nostalgia?
Idea.
Because we see The Rock and Kevin Hart and all these big movie stars,
Yeah.
but still,
Some of them, their numbers don't as reflect on what you see on social media.
Well, here's what I would say. I think, before kind of like the intense domination of direct consumer distribution and social media, I think that, the system of Hollywood was amazing at creating movie stars.
Right.
Okay. I think if you look at some of the big successes of the last couple of years, many of them were driven by movie stars, but they were like, maybe I would call them legacy stars.
right.
What I'm trying to say is, I don't know if new stars are really being created anymore the same
100%.
way they were 10 years ago.
100%. I
I
agree.
can argue there's outliers like maybe Timothée Chalamet, who I
Yeah.
think is a massive star.
Right.
But if you look at the success of like, the Mission Impossible, there's stars today that have done incredible at the box office who were, for lack of a better phrase, invented 15, 20 years ago.
Right.
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 But because there's so few new stars, those people still have a relevance in the global distribution of feature films. And that's why we see so many of these legacy superstars still working today and driving the biggest movies.
What is the landscape for even black movie stars? How does that look like, even for our own economy?
It's a great question. I mean, I think that
It's very. I don't even think we can count them on one hand, probably.
yeah. Listen, I just think that there's a lot of amazing young stars today that I think are incredible actors,
Right.
With incredible talent and have all the potential in the world, right? It's about finding the right vehicles. When you think about be careful how I say this. If you think about just how movies are marketed today,
Yeah.
right? There's not as many opportunity for stars to be on that platform to be developed.
Right.
And I don't know if that'll get better or worse. I'm not really sure.
We can't tell.
But then I also think about like, you know, I grew up with films. Even when I got to Hollywood, it was the golden age of television. That became a big thing, right? But, you know, I'm 40 now.
Woo!
Big 4-0.
Damn.
Big 4-0. Yeah, that's crazy. It's nuts. And when I talk to like people either the company who are like interns or assistants or young execs or family that are younger, like they spend a lot of time on social media.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't think they view content creators as less important than big traditional stars.
Right. Yeah.
So what does that tell me? It tells me that content is evolving deeply, right? And a lot of what we thought was the holy grail of entertainers in Hollywood, to me, feels a little dated.
Right.
I think there's massive stars that make massively distributed content from their palm with their cell phone with no massive production, and they're just as relevant as some of the biggest stars in the world today.
What do you see as far as internationally? How does that translate from like a Kevin Hart, and how does that translate internationally?
Yeah.
And some of the brands and deals that you guys work out there.
I mean, listen, I think the world is so connected today because of social media and because of digital platforms. I think that, you know, everything we do at Netflix has massive global reach, right? Every film release is seen in most territories around the world. Some of those audiences have never seen a Kevin Hart movie, have never seen a Heartbeat movie, right? But because of digital distribution, they're able to like lean in and experience it, right? So I think in many ways, there's never been a greater time to make something that can truly be viral globally, whether that is a literal kind of viral digital thing or a $150 million feature film. I think it's all very accessible today. I would say, though, just the mode of the consumption has changed.
True.
So a lot of 10 years ago or 15 years ago, a global hit meant it was in theaters around the world in every major territory.
Right.
Okay? I think today you can have a global hit and it be digitally distributed and no one's leaving their home.
Right. Yeah. It becomes an event in a sense.
That's right.
Do some of your partners, such as Netflix, share those numbers with you, or they say, "Hey, they did very well. Good job. Let's get another one going."
They do. I mean, listen, they have metrics they keep proprietary to them,
Right.
but they're fantastic partners. So we have a deep understanding of how our films perform. I think I can say this in all the territories it's released in. So we know where it's working. We know where it's not.
Oh, that's great.
And what do you guys do with that metrics and that data? How do you guys translate to pick your next project?
I mean, you can imagine it helps inform strategy, and there's things you can do maybe on the marketing side of things to increase awareness in weaker markets about the brand and the people involved in it. So it's all kind of in the process of strategy. Right. But I would say at the end of the day, like a great film or show will travel, right? We put our energy there first, and then everything else comes second.
Okay, so now let's go back into
Let's
the
go
life.
back to the
Because
story.
we get more like this. We go tennis match.
Let me get some notes here.
Yeah. That was our more personal stuff. But let's go back to your life. What was your introduction to Sony, and what was that transition look like?
So you go from New Regency, then you go to
right.
Brian Davis, or was
Barron.
it
Barron
Yeah,
Davis.
so I was at New Regency for about 8.5 years. So I was
Oh
an
wow, he was there
assistant
for a minute.
with Yuri, then Arnon. Then I was working in home entertainment. At that time, we were still selling DVDs, and they thought Blu-ray would be the big savior of home entertainment.
We can laugh at them now.
Just kidding.
I would say it was also the time though where like digital distribution was becoming a thing.
Right.
So Netflix was like available like on a lot of people don't remember this, on gaming devices. So if you had a Wii or Xbox or PlayStation, that's the first place they launched the Netflix app. Right. So it's like for early adopters.
Did you see those early stages of Netflix? Or it was
Well, it was in the air.
in the air? Got it.
So if you had a library, you had movies or shows, right? There was a company called Netflix, which you all knew because the DVD by mail was a big thing at the time.
Big thing.
Big thing.
I remember
It
that.
changed the game.
Right.
Netflix has changed the game a couple of times.
Yeah,
Red
that's true.
Box was
They
crazy.
changed the game, and then you started hearing, but most people didn't know if you weren't a gamer, that they had this app where you could, I don't even think they called it streaming. I don't know what they called it.
I don't know. Yeah,
Right.
watch TV
Video
on
on
Watch
demand.
TV, video on demand, right? But you started hearing in the home entertainment circles of this company, Netflix, licensing more and more content, right? Yeah. So they were going to all the studios and the networks, and they were licensing shows and films to stream on their new app, right? So it was becoming a thing. But then also, a lot of the big legacy home entertainment companies were leaning into transactional home entertainment. So they believed that people would buy digital versions of movies, right, and rent digital versions of movies, and that would hopefully save the packaged good business of DVDs and Blu-ray, right? But I think in time, it became pretty apparent that the subscription model was going to be the dominant model, which was quite frankly devastating to the business model of most major studios.
Right. Jeez, Louise. Okay, so what was the transition like to New Regency, Baron Davis to Sony? Because that's a huge jump, and that's a major studio.
And did you always wanted to be an executive at this point? Where's your career going? Like, maybe I want to do this.
So I went to film school.
Right.
Yeah.
Before that, as I told you guys, I was like directing and producing and writing.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you're going away from
That's
directing.
right. So I was moving further and further from the creative part of the business and
Wow.
deeper into home entertainment.
Wait,
biz
sorry, don't mean to
development.
stop you, but
That's
how
right.
did you feel about that?
It's weird, man. I always knew that it was an appropriate detour to get me to where I wanted to be. I was never nervous about. There were moments.
Right.
Did I make the wrong choice? Did I go too far this way?
Right.
But I was deeply confident in my ability to be great. To figure it out, right? So even there was moments when, I would tell people all the time, I joke to people in our company, home entertainment is the furthest thing from producing. It's a spreadsheet deck business, right? It's like, at that time, you didn't lose money when you released a DVD. It was so dialed in. You knew exactly how many DVDs to print. You knew exactly where they were being shipped to. You knew exactly how many would be returned, right?
Wow.
You knew exactly how much money you would make within 5%. Before you agreed,
They had it down to a
release.
science back then.
It was a science,
Wow.
right? So
With limited technology too, it's crazy.
it wasn't sexy to the point,
Wow.
right? But I learned so much about business, right? And it really helped propel me to all the things I did after that. So I just knew I would get back to it. Get back to like the producing thing.
Yeah.
So your
Whatever
next
that
film you'll be directing and produced by, directed by Bryan Smiley.
That's right.
That'd be amazing.
So okay, you go there, you get introduced into a new giant,
Right.
Which is Sony Pictures or Columbia. And what was the first introduction like stepping onto the lot? And you say, now I'm a studio.
It was great, but I would say, listen, I tell people all the time, like it's layers to building relationships, right? So the man that hired me was a mentor and friend, Sanford Panich, who was the president of Columbia Pictures.
Oh wow. Okay.
And I knew Sanford from many years before. When I was an assistant, he was a president of production at New Regency, right?
Wow.
He left New Regency to go launch a division for Fox. And before I started with Barron, I was consulting for Fox Digital Entertainment, which at that time was also run by Sanford, right?
Jeez.
So relationships are very, very important.
Right.
So I was with Barron. We were doing a lot of these kind of like influencer, rapper-driven films and shows we were developing, right? And long story short, Sanford was like, "Yeah, man, you're doing great things there. Just come here and make movies at Columbia, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me." But I tell people all the time, like the incredible part is people, and especially when you come into like major studio, I was vice president of production. Most people in my job who are VPs or SVPs or EVPs spent their entire careers just in development,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
They're assistants and CEs and
Right.
okay. So that was my first paid. With Barron, we were making content, but it was my first kind of paid studio gig in development.
And at the time, were you making real money? Like, are you living in a nice house or six figures?
Okay.
Pre or post Sony.
Let's do
Pre-Sony.
pre-Sony.
So here's what I would say. When I left New Regency to go consult, it was the most money I ever made in my life to that point.
Wow.
And then when I left consulting to start a company with Barron and Zen and one of my best friends today, I made a lot less money.
Right. So you pretty much utilizing the money that you just made.
That's right.
And then you start this company. How will you feel emotionally? Like, what am I doing? Am I like going backwards?
But during this time, the economy was okay. It's not 2024 where
true.
we're like, I don't know what's coming up
That's
next.
right. I made decent money,
Right.
but I owned the company and we had to be scrappy, right?
Right,
Like
yeah.
we made money based on what we were able to like close,
True.
right?
Right.
But I would say that scrappiness was such an incredible lesson to the next job at Sony. And I tell people this all the time. Every single job I've had has prepared me for the next one. No matter how different it may have felt for where you're trying to go,
Right.
there's things to truly learn. So, after leaving our company, it was called No Label with Baron. It was I got a lot of like experience working with like writers and filmmakers and talent that I hadn't really had before the same way. So then transitioning to Sony, a lot of that knowledge and experience was really beneficial to coming into a studio environment where they tell you like you need to make big studio commercial movies.
Yeah.
Right.
No indie shit.
Yeah.
We at that time we don't do streaming.
Right.
We make theatrical movies.
Big movies.
Yeah,
Big
right.
boy
So
What
stuff.
was some of your
here's
franchise
what I was-
pieces that you guys were? Well, you were a part of, or
here's what I'm
executive
saying.
producing.
So what they did, which was amazing, because they recognize, and I think this is important too, when you have people who are like your mentors or people who are your bosses, right?
Right.
Hopefully they understand what you excel at. So although my job was to make big studio movies, they allowed me to be very entrepreneurial because they knew that's who I was. So
Right.
I did a deal with Steph Curry. That was his first ever content deal. And it was a film, TV, and consumer products deal, which is the first time Sony had ever done that.
Yeah.
Right? They let me do that. I did Issa Rae's first film deal. It was a 5-picture deal with Sony.
So what
and it
am I
was-
doing that, bro? I'm just kidding.
But how did you cultivate these relationships? Did you like reach out to
And how did
Sony?
you know who was hot in these streets? Did you always keep?
Well, knowing who's hot is about taste.
Yeah.
And then knowing who moves the needle is about brains.
Right.
So to the point I was making earlier, I'm actually not a massive sports fan. I'm fortunate. I have friends who, I don't want to sound crazy. Friends who are involved in sports teams,
Right.
parents own teams, whatever. So I've been in really crazy, amazing situations, but I still not like a crazy sports dude.
Right.
What I learned from Barron, who was a former NBA player, was the power of athletes in Hollywood. Meaning, a lot of these big executives across town love athletes, especially in LA. Right?
Really?
So I understood quickly the doors that could be opened.
Right.
So even to your question about like how did you know? Like with Steph hadn't really done content that way.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the time, I mean, this guy was like winning championships. He was a big deal.
Yeah. 100%.
So I knew what that meant. I knew the deal flow that could come from a Steph Curry stepping in the room. And it was Steph and Eric Payton, who still runs his company.
was this
today,
like an
Bryan
entourage conversation? So, yo, Steph, I'm gonna bring you some money. Just let me
Listen,
handle this.
I didn't know Steph. I knew Steph's guys. And I
Okay.
said, hey, Steph wants to get into content.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, can you help us?
Wow.
And I never forget this. I said, all right, here's the deal. I love you guys. The guy's got to be serious.
Right.
So if you can get Steph in the room, he can tell me what you just told me, we're in business.
Wow.
And like 3 weeks later, Steph comes in. I'm like, okay,
Yep.
let's figure this out. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but the point I was trying to make is I knew from working with Barron the power of athletes. Right. So when Steph said he wanted to like really build something with Eric and Jerron, I was all about it. And I was right. He came to Sony and everyone showed up for the meeting, right?
Jeez.
And that's why we were able to accomplish what we accomplished from that deal perspective.
And what was the setup like doing Issa Rae's picture deal? And where did she land at? HBO or was it?
So at the time she had a TV deal. I think she had a TV deal at HBO. I'm pretty
And that
sure
was
that
with
was true.
Mark and Larry Whitmore? Or
Well,
that's before them?
I know they show ran her show.
Okay.
But I think she had like some type of TV structured deal at Warner. I don't remember exactly, but I knew her film business was open.
Oh, okay.
So we did a deal where we said, let's work with Issa and
And she
bring
was
in-
already hot at the time.
She was hot.
Yeah, okay.
But I would say she was hot. But I would say
She was coming
That's
of
right.
age.
She was very well known among the people.
Yes,
right?
yes.
She had a critically acclaimed and commercially successful TV show on HBO.
Right.
Right. But she was still not quite in the film side of things as a producer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what we recognized with Issa, to the credit of the guys at Sony, was she had a really good eye for up and coming, diverse talent. So we said, how do we work with Issa, identify the next great writers and directors and producers through her lens that we can bring into the studio feature business. So I was very proud of that opportunity. But to the other question, but what they also allowed me to do is build my own slate. So oftentimes executives come into studios and they're given like
Yeah, they were given projects to
but they're
do.
saying like you got to work on like this franchise,
Yep.
right? But for me, they said you can build it how you want to.
Why was
How
that?
did that happen?
They just believed in my point of view.
Real.
So at the time I left Sony, I think I had something like 20 projects in development that were completely from my brain and hustle.
Wow, that is crazy to give you that much free reins in a studio system.
It's highly unusual.
Yeah.
You know, Devon and also Lamar, they talked about they didn't have the financial stake into some of these projects they were investing in. And that's why they kind of, I don't want to say the transition out.
Lamar
but
didn't transit. He's still in.
Lamar still was in there, but Devon mostly. And what would you say was your transitioning out of the studio system? And what was your kind
Well, I think I love business, right?
Yeah.
As I told you before. So I always had two jobs. I had my day job, and I had the Bryan Smiley only thing, Bryan Smiley Enterprise, I call it. So, right before I got to Sony, I had co-founded with the really smart. He's like my blood at this point. The guy named Delane Parnell, an esports company called Play Versus, and it was a platform built to allow high school and collegiate players to form esports teams and compete.
Oh, wow.
All of his idea.
That's insane. Yeah.
But I believed in him deeply. Before that, we owned a Call of Duty team. This is when I was at New Regency.
What?
Yeah.
What? You was in the gaming aspect?
Esports,
Yeah, we had a company called Rush Esports, and we had a license to have one of the first Call of Duty teams, right? And we sold that to another company called Team Solamid. We took that money and we started Play VS, right?
Wow.
And the proposition at the beginning was very different, but the point I'm trying to make is that endeavor for me became one of my best decisions in life. Okay, so I was at Sony doing the development thing.
Yeah.
I, for a lot of reasons, had the opportunity to exit Play BS. And I was coming up on 2 years at Sony, and they were great to me.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
But I did ask myself, is there a bigger vision for my day job where I could do a lot more?
Yeah.
And it's weird because, movies have been my dream for a very long time, as I said.
Right.
And I understood that being at a major studio like Columbia Pictures was a dream for so many, right? But I also wanted more. So I was at a real weird inflection point. I was like, do I stay here? I was coming up at the end of my contract. Most studio execs get a 2+1,
Yep.
which is 2 years plus a year
Yep.
option. I was coming up on the second year, and then the Heartbeat opportunity kind of arose. And I'm going to give you a very short version of the story.
Yeah.
I decided to raise my hand for the job. It was to do film and TV, right? And I spent a lot of time with Kevin. And for me, hearing him talk about entrepreneurship and how he wanted to like really grow his company, it was pretty exciting.
Right. And he's a
So,
hustler too, so
He's the hardest working man in Hollywood.
yeah.
Harder
So-
than The Rock? I mean, The Rock got freaking
I-
face wash.
listen, everyone-
He got face wash. He got tattooed.
Here's what I would say. Listen, Dwayne's amazing. I think Kevin he works day and night, and he's passionate about everything he's a part of.
We see the goatee coming now. So
That's right.
He working
That's right.
hard.
He working hard. That's right. There's a meme going around. So he's really infectious. So I think, it was weird because my contract wasn't over yet, and I'll say that the studio was very fair to me.
Yeah.
And we figured it out. And I left Sony a little early, quite frankly.
Wow. And they didn't have to do that.
They did not.
Wow.
So I to this day, I respect those guys deeply, Tom and Sanford. And Sanford is somebody I still hold very close. But
They said, Brian, don't bring your films over here.
that's right. But the Heartbeat thing came up, and it, for me, was like an opportunity to do a lot
Right.
with Kevin.
So your first introduction of Heartbeat, how many films did they toss at you? What were some of the big ideas or did you bring big ideas to the
It
table?
was a little bit of both. So when I came to the company, at that point, they were maybe a year into a first look deal at Universal.
Okay.
But Kevin, like today, at that time, was the biggest name in comedy.
Yeah.
Right. So I inherited, 10, 12 projects at every major studio. We had 2 at Sony and 2 at Warner and 2 at Union, or more at Union. The point being, we had a robust activity at every major studio in town. Right. So, and by the way, so I should back up. What I learned quickly at Sony there were a handful of people that really moved the needle. Maybe 10.
Wow.
10 names between men and women. Maybe it's 15 between men and women that if they're involved in your project,
It's automatic
project
green.
moves like a rocket ship.
Can you
Yeah.
tell me those 10 names?
It's like a Drake. It's a
By
Drake
the way,
track.
it's the same 10 names. The names
Yeah.
haven't we talk about like Hollywood star power.
Yeah.
It's the same names for
Yeah.
like the last
Decade.
You know
almost.
their name.
Right. So I knew the power of Kevin Hart. I knew it.
Right.
I was sitting in that room with my colleagues and the heads of the studio, and you knew if he was attached to something, it was a priority for the studio. So I have an opportunity to run his film and TV business. I knew what that meant. So coming into the company, that was definitely true. And for me, as somebody who loves business and has really big dreams, yes, a part of it is like, how do you make great content, for sure.
Right.
But the other part of it was immediately, how do we grow this business into something even bigger and greater? And that's kind of been the journey I've been on for the last 4.5 years now.
And what's the difference between Heartbeat and, like, say, Tyler Perry Studios?
It's a lot of differences. I would say, listen, Tyler Perry, I think, has built a really massive infrastructure of a business.
Yeah.
Right? He does development. He stars in a lot of his content, and he has unparalleled like studio facilities from an independent standpoint. So
Right.
I think what he has done has been tremendous. I think for us, we are building out more of the infrastructure, but
Like physical buildings and stuff like
Studios.
that. Studios.
yeah, like so we have a 50,000 square foot facility in Canoga Park. We do production out of. We have production offices in Atlanta. We have production in our headquarters on the podcast side, for example, the audio side. So we're growing that out, right? But
Yeah.
Tyler is on a studio scale, as far as
Yeah.
major Hollywood studio scale, which I gotta say is just incredible to see what he's built.
I mean, 50 Cent's just launched his too.
I just saw his
it's
thing
crazy.
in Shreveport, which is pretty amazing. So for us, we do a lot of development. We do physical production on the unscripted and low budget feature side.
Okay.
We are in every format from features, big budget, low budget, television, scripted, unscripted, and audio, including radio and audiobooks and podcasts. So I get to play in a lot of formats, which is highly exciting for me.
Yeah. I mean, even with Heartbeat, is Heartbeat trying to tackle like the A24 until they get their feet on the ground? Like, hey, look, we can make impactful films with low budgets.
Yeah, I think so. So last year we produced 3 low budget features, all under $15 million, right? In addition to our Netflix deal.
And that's outside of Netflix.
It's outside of Netflix.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
I think, but everything we do, we show Netflix first. They're our partner.
course.
So I think I imagine a world in which we do more of those kind of lower budget films, but also where we do a lot more studio level films. I think last year released something like 23 different pieces of content between film, TV, and audio, not including our branded entertainment content. So we stay very, very busy.
Jeez Louise.
What do you see as far as the landscape now in 2024? Is studios are investing in pieces of content at the level they did 2 years ago after the pandemic?
I don't know. That's a great question. I think so much of the business today are driven by streaming platforms. And I believe that the streamers will decide for themselves what types of content grow the platform and maintain the subscriber base. Right.
Yeah.
The mix between episodic, scripted, unscripted features is TBD. We'll see.
What are some of your mandates right now as far as things that you guys are looking forward to kind of put out there into the
Quality
world?
is amazing.
Yeah.
You know, I teased earlier, we have a series that we're in production right now in Atlanta. I can't say what it is per se, or I think it's been announced. It's called Fight Night.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
Fight Night.
And that
Samuel
is
Jackson.
Sam Jackson and Don Cheadle and Taraji P. Henson.
Yeah.
And Terrence Howard and many other great people, young people, including like, Sean Qua and Melvin Gregg and Sam, but like others. Really excited about that.
Yeah.
Launch, sometime in the near future. But like super high quality content, comedies in our DNA. So we're always looking for anything that is kind of rooted in comedy.
Right.
And then anything that touches the culture.
What do you, as far as, let's go into AI and technology. People are so afraid of it. What are you seeing as far as the integration of AI into the movie business as itself?
I don't think we really know the extent of it yet. I think AI will be a tool, no different than like special effects are today.
Right.
I could see a world in which AI is used to bring costs down on a lot of things.
Right.
There's technology today where a talent can essentially create a voice ID for them that can then be used in voiceover work or animation work without that person actually having to record every day, right? So from a tool perspective, I think you see a lot of studios playing with different things.
Yeah.
And a lot of filmmakers, quite frankly, too.
Yeah.
I mean, I've gotten pitches from very savage filmmakers that really show you the movie
Yeah, I know.
completely created in AI.
Yeah. Using not Sora, but Runway AI, most of these
Mid-journey
image
stuff.
generated movies.
I think today what you're seeing is a lot of different pieces of technology kind of brought together to create something. I think that'll become more streamlined over time, right? But this is, I think, in many ways, the very early stages.
Now, are you seeing a shift in Hollywood? Like, because there's a lot of studio systems are not making money in streaming. So what is that shift looking like for Heartbeat, and where are you guys trying to navigate towards? Where is money made?
Well, listen, we believe that whether you're a streamer first or theatrical first or whatever it is, that people want brands and talent that audiences know.
Right. Yeah.
So we are a little agnostic. I mean, on the film side, we have an incredible deal at Netflix. They are a streaming first company, and we completely believe in their mission and plan, and we're completely behind that, right? But we still have development all over town. So at every major studio, regardless if they're streaming first or not, I think it's about great content will find a home.
We'll find a home.
And we're going to always stay at the forefront of distribution trends. And wherever our partners are, we'll be there too.
Outside of Heartbeat, Bryan as a person,
Yeah.
what is his mandate?
Yeah.
What is his overall reaching goal?
Listen, right now, I have the ability to make great things.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
With
a beautiful
great
thing too.
Leader in Kevin Hart. We have a lot of really smart business leaders at our company that are not just in development, right? That are in operations and strategy and finance and legal and marketing. So I'm learning still today from great executives at Heartbeat. But with that said, it's like I recognize the ability to make just great shit. And I am, with the team, of course, always looking for the next great idea.
Would you ever consider directing in the near future?
It's not for me.
No, really. So you fully
You've seen
stepped,
enough of it.
you fully stepped away from
I
it.
fully stepped away. I think that is a hyper-specific talent and skill set and mindset and energy.
Yeah.
And I love fantastic filmmakers. I had a
Right.
great time with F. Gary Gray on Lyft, who was kind of an icon of mine over the many years. And being able to work with him was super satisfying.
Yeah.
I don't need to be in that chair.
Now, tell us, a lot of people have Hollywood stories. One Hollywood story that you say, this was out of this world crazy, that you can share publicly.
You're right.
You know, a lot of people they can't share.
I don't
those
know.
things.
So I don't. That's a tough question. It's a lot of those, right? And most of which I feel like I
Yeah.
can't talk about on camera.
Yeah, most definitely.
being recorded.
I mean,
Go
Here's
ahead.
what I say. I would think, like, listen, if you are a someone who's excited about movies or TV or entertainment or content, I've had the privilege to meet everyone I've ever
yeah.
admired.
Jeez
right? And
Louise.
sometimes work with those people too. By the way, not just on the development or creative or in front of the camera, even on the business side. I've
Yeah.
met incredible agents who are legends, right? I mean, I won't tell the story now.
yeah. I mean, okay, what is the major differences between a billionaire and a millionaire, and what is the mindsets like?
And where do
'Cause
you
you
sit
hang out
at?
with
Where do you
both.
sit at?
I know I'm not even close. Not even close to $1 billion. Here's what I would say. I would say that it is a little different.
Yeah.
And I would say that billionaires really view the world differently.
They view money differently too, I guess. Huh?
I think they view money differently. I think they play by their own set of rules. That's what I would say. Which is probably evident by pop culture. You look at what's
Yeah.
happening in our world today.
Yeah, yeah.
I think
Oh my
that's pretty
gosh.
apparent.
Of course.
They really have their own rules.
Right.
Right? The rules are built for everyone else, not them. So that's the biggest difference.
Wow, that's beautiful. All right, let's get to the last question.
Yeah, we're
'cause
gonna get to the last question. One before the last question. What do you do to balance work and life? What do you do for fun? What do you do
Yeah.
outside of the movie business in itself?
I mean, that's a tough question. I mean, the reality is, I think to be successful in this business, you have to actually love movies,
Yeah,
love
true.
TV, and love content. So I watch a lot of TV,
Yeah.
scripted and unscripted. By the way, I'm watching a lot of YouTube today.
Really?
On my TVs. I love YouTube. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like you can learn about anything.
100%.
Any hobby, any
Literally, that's how
whatever.
we learned how to do all the camera
That's
stuff
right.
too.
Everything is there, right? And obviously films. I mean, so I spend a lot of time just absorbing that content. A lot of my closest friends, are in the business. So it's just really kind of fellowshipping with great people, smart people, finding the next thing, spark of an idea, right? And it maybe it sounds like work if you're not connected the way I am, but I just think it's not. It's just the lifestyle.
You're steadily evolving and see how the industry is shifting.
That's
and you're
right.
just like finding it on our platforms.
Facts.
top 5 films you've seen this year, or top 2?
This year is only
This year, like 2024, like the last 12 months.
2023
and 2024.
I mean, I really love Barbarian.
Oh, I love Barbarian.
Yeah, I thought that was
fantastic.
That was
it's
fantastic.
a tremendous film by New Regency. I love Leave the World Behind.
Oh yeah, that was really good.
Got me talking. I actually really love Napoleon. I feel like it didn't get a lot of love.
Yeah.
It wasn't for everybody. I was a huge fan of it.
Yeah, I like Napoleon actually.
I feel like I'm missing a really important. It was something I saw recently that was like, this is
Dune.
why. By the way, so it's funny you said that. I actually really love Dune 1.
Yeah.
I just bought Dune 2 at home. By the
Oh,
way.
okay.
I haven't watched it yet. Maybe this weekend.
Dune 2 is amazing.
But I'm excited to watch Dune 2.
Dune is out of this world. It's a cinematic masterpiece. I literally had to go watch it twice, and I was like back to back. I was like, it's just something that, these are the old ways of filmmaking.
I definitely
I
felt
agree.
like a nostalgic film for sure.
The second one or both?
The second one.
The second one.
I love the first one. So
The first one was great.
People tell me the
Fantastic.
second one is even better.
Even
Yeah,
better, I
even
promise.
So I'm actually really excited.
Especially if
to
you
watch
see it in IMAX, is really dope.
That's
right.
Really good. Well, we don't want to keep you all day. The last question we always ask our guests is, we go through this journey of life and we culminate so many different things, so many different tasks and journeys and things that we do. What do you think is the meaning of life, and what is your overall purpose of life?
it. Jesus.
Yeah, I know.
That's a question.
Because we always
Studio-
pursuers, right? We start this life as I had a dream. You had a filmmaker, you pick up the camera, and it's pretty much you get to this journey where you are now, and it's like, have I found what I was looking for when I first pick up the camera?
At
And
16, Brian, I got a camera. And then seeing Brian now.
I don't know. Those are heavy. I'll hear what I would say. I think I've come to a place now where I think life is truly about chapters. And sure, you can do the same thing your entire life
Right.
and absolutely love it. Like that's your thing. But I think personally, I can be deeply fulfilled by doing many different things. Meaning, if you guys told me, hey, tomorrow, you can never work in content again. You can never work in entertainment. You can never work in movies. I would actually be okay.
Really?
completely.
Wow.
Because I am curious and excited about a lot of things in this world, right? And including, by the way, I do dream of one day taking like 5 years to travel the world and not do anything but experience life.
Yeah.
Because I just think life is short.
Yes, 100%.
And I don't want to leave this earth without trying and experiencing a lot of different things. And I don't need to be locked into a career to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
Or to success or to wealth. Because life, I think, is so much bigger than that. And I think one thing I would say, not to be this guy, but as you get a little older, right? As I told you, I turned 40 this year. You do recognize there is an end, right? At least on this planet, whatever your beliefs are, right?
Yeah.
At some point on this planet, you will expire. And for me, I don't take that lightly.
Yeah.
Right.
And I want to make sure that I have enough time while I'm here to experience a lot of other things. So what's the purpose? I'm not sure, right? But I think for me, it's like getting the most out of this experience before it's over.